Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today we're going to take a look at a classic vintage action figure from the A-Team, and that is Murdock. In front of me here you can see my carded version of Murdock. These figures were released by Galoob in the 1980s, and also a selection of my action figures from that toy line. So let's take a closer look at the card for Murdock and we'll see what sort of details that they give you about the toy. So here we have Murdock still on his card. Now these figures are not that hard to find really. I think I picked this one up quite recently for under £20 for a reasonable condition carded figure. As you can see, there's a little bit of wear to the top of the card, but these bigger cards tend to suffer a bit like that because there's an awful lot of card to get folded over. But as you can see, for £20 you can still get a pretty reasonable figure. Now these were released by Galoob in 1983. Galoob is a toy company that I've never been that impressed by. Most of the figures that they produce are sort of pretty average, and I have to say I think a lot of these A-Team figures are in that sort of realm of pretty average figures. But I had this figure as a child and I absolutely loved it, which is why I've had to get it again to add to my collection. So on the front of the card you can see at the top it says the A-Team, Soldiers of Fortune living on the edge, and it has a very blurred picture of Murdock there, and it says Murdock underneath. Now the nice thing about these cards is the fact that they have some bullet holes through them. If you see there, I put my hand, you can see that it gets darker. There's 4 bullet holes, and that is quite nice because that links into the logo as you would see it at the beginning of each episode of the A-Team, and if you watched it every week you'd get to know that very well. On the front of the card obviously you can see you have Murdock there with a couple of accessories on display, and on the side here it shows you exactly what you're going to get, which is Murdock. You get the survival backpack and harness, binoculars, supply belt, grappling hook and string, and an M16 rifle and shoulder strap, and it says fully posable action figure Galoob. So on the back of the card what do we get? We have a little bit more information. It shows you the 5 characters that you could get in the initial set of figures, which is of course BA, Hannibal, the Face, Murdock and Amy Allen, and it says collect all the A-Team figures, sets and accessories. It doesn't really show you what the figures are like though, it's just little black and white images. And at the top here we have a précis of the bit of text that's read out at the beginning of the show about how they were wrongly imprisoned and that they're soldiers of fortune. So not a great deal of information on the card. As I said, I wasn't that impressed ever with Galoob's figures and cards, and I think these cards are pretty boring. It's nice to have the logo with the little bullet holes at the top, but the rest of the card is pretty dull, and it doesn't look that good if you have lots of them on display because they do look a little bit samey. So let's take a closer look at the action figure itself. And here's the man himself, Murdock. Now Murdock was always my favourite character in the show, and it was the only figure I actually managed to save up and buy, so this has a real strong memory for me of my childhood collection. Now the figures are fairly basic in construction. They're made out of a very hard plastic, but they do have swivel hips which sort of get a little bit wider as you swing the hips forward, and you can also bend the knees so you can get them in a seating position, which is quite nice. The hands are, I would say, probably the biggest letdown of this figure, because you've got one hand that's sort of sculpted into a, I don't really know what that is, it's like he's holding a ball or something, and the other hand is supposed to be able to hold the gun, but as you can see it doesn't really do that. You've just got a sort of hole in a fist shape there, and none of the weapons particularly sat that well in these hands ever, so I always thought that was a little bit disappointing. The waist does swivel, you can see here, you can rotate the waist, and also the head rotates. The head is the only part of it that's made out of a sort of rubbery plastic, and you can actually pull these heads off with ease. Now of course he comes with a few accessories. Again, the accessories, they're actually not too bad. The sculpts on them is okay. You can see here if I show you the binoculars, they do actually look like binoculars and come with a little rubber strap. I was always a bit frustrated by this backpack. This one actually holds on quite well, but the one I had as a child, the way it's constructed with a sort of solid plastic backpack held onto little rubber straps, it always used to fall off. And again, the belt was very hard to get on and keep in place. But really, when you play with these, I don't think I had most of the accessories on him. I kept the gun and all the other bits just went in a box, so he was really just played with as Murdock and a gun. Now if I bring in another one of the figures here, I've got Face. It looks pretty much like these sculpts are identical, but they are actually all different. All of the jackets are sculpted differently, all of the legs are sculpted differently. It's just because they made them look like they were trying to wear the same sort of outfits and just painted differently, but they are actually all different. I think if you look at BA is the only one that really clearly is a different mould, but all of these are. One thing you will notice if you have a few of these figures is the craziness in the face. Obviously this is howling mad Murdock, so he's got to have a little bit of a sort of mad glint in his eye. And this guy doesn't look too crazy, but if I bring in another one that I have from my collection, which is this guy here, he is really mad. This almost looks more like Jack Nicholson than Murdock from the TV show. I think this was just down to how they were manufacturers in factories. Sometimes paint applications went a bit awry. This guy's got really quite bright red lips, whereas this guy has almost no red on him. In fact, the red is actually painted onto his teeth. So if you want to pick up different versions of these, then you could easily pick up quite a few with varying paint applications, and they all look a little bit different and a little bit crazy. After the A-Team had been and gone from the TV screens of my childhood, Murdock actually became a member of the Ghostbusters because he had these beige trousers. I took all of his equipment off him and made him a little jacket that made him look like Venkman from the Ghostbusters, and that's how he spent a large part of the next few years, because I was absolutely enthralled by the movies, and I thought that this was the closest figure I could get to a Ghostbuster because there were no Ghostbusters toys around. Now, these figures aren't that hard to find. You can pick them up loose for a quid, maybe less than a quid, without their weapons. They are really common here in the UK. Finding the weapons is a little bit harder. I think I picked up this guy with he's missing one part of his weapon, which is the little sort of grappling hook off the belt, but I think I only paid £6 for him, even with all of these weapons. So you can see it's not that expensive to buy, and as I mentioned earlier, the carded ones, that was only £20. You see them listed on eBay for a lot more, but if you wait and are patient, they do turn up for a lot less. So I hope you've enjoyed my little trip down memory lane with this toy and how I used to play with him. He isn't a great toy, but he's a good toy, and I think that's really all that matters. Sometimes you can put too many features in a figure, and this figure has almost no features apart from the fact that you can bend his knees. They do get a little bit floppy over the years. If you look at my face man here, you can see he's incredibly floppy and barely stands up, but I like that because it shows the fact that this guy's really been played with, and I think that's what happened to a lot of these A-Team figures. Because they were such an action-packed sort of TV show, they did get played with a lot by children. They went into all sorts of action adventures in gardens and everywhere, and so the fact that they're played with is a really good thing. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of this figure, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter and Facebook.